Hi there, Felipe Faria. I'm a Portuguese fantasy author. My books are very good and you should totally buy them, but that's not what I'm here to talk about today. See, I have this little channel in which I talk to other Portuguese authors, just because Portugal's literature and language are both criminally undervalued at home. So today I'm taking a bit of a different approach. I am going to expand outwards, as we're here to talk about a fellow countrywoman of mine who seems to have been making the literary rounds abroad lately. She's half Portuguese, half Angolan, born in Portugal, and currently resides in the UK. The Colors of Death is her debut novel, and I would very much like to pick her brain to know how and why it all happened and what else we can expect from her in the future. I'm talking about Patrícia Marques. Patrícia, thanks for accepting, and welcome to Literatura Nacional.
Thank you for having me. Hi, everyone.
So, Patrícia, give us a little glimpse into your life. How exactly you came to want to write a book, let alone publish one. No, not a small feat.
It's interesting because I didn't set out wanting to get published. It's more something that just, it sounds very, very privileged. It's something that just kind of happened. When I moved here, I was 8 when I moved here, and so I didn't speak English at all. And you could say that before I moved here, I didn't really read too much, too in depth. I mean, I know I was young, but I had all the books in Portugal that were the Anita. I think they're the books, but I had that collection that probably most girls my age in Portugal had. But apart from that, I hadn't really branched out. So when I got here, part of the way that I started to learn the language was I started to read because I didn't have that many friends. So, you know, you start to read and things like that. You start to pick up the language, you speak more. And then I kind of started running out of books to read because I was reading too many, and one was like, no, 2 books a week. And when I ran out of books, I started to write because I didn't have anything else to read. I thought, okay, I'll write so that I can read. And then I just kind of carried on doing that. And I think maybe a couple of years ago, I'd say maybe 5 or 6 years ago, I started to think, no, this is something that I actually really do want to get published. I want to be successful at this. And but I didn't quite know how to go about it. I would start writing a book. Probably as a fellow writer, you've had this yourself, but I would start writing a book, get about 20,000 words in, and it wouldn't go anywhere because I'd have a new and better idea. And so I'd start a new and better idea, and it was just continuing, but I'd never finish anything. So what ended up happening was they had this master's degree here, which you had to basically, they had it for literary students, they had it for crime writers. And in order to pass the master's, you needed to write a full novel. So no matter what you did, even if you did all the assignments, all the projects, etc., if you didn't finish the novel, you don't pass. And so I kind of did that as a way to force myself. Like I had no choice. If I didn't finish it, I was going to lose money because degrees are very expensive, and I was going to, fail at a qualification. So I kind of had no choice, and I managed to complete that. And from there, one of my lecturers who actually marked my work, he's the one that then pushed me to actually submit it to agents, because although I'd finished it, it was far from the book that is out in the bookshelves now. And I lacked that confidence and courage to actually approach agents on my own. But he gave me that push, and he continued to ask me, have you submitted it yet? Have you submitted to this person and this person? I was like, no. And I thought, he's not going to leave me alone until I do. So then I did. And that's when everything kind of snowballed from there. And I ended up with a published book.
Interesting. You should mention that writing because you essentially ran out of things to read about and having to be pushed by others. We do have a similar path towards publishing. It was my dad in my case. He did push quite a bit.
Good.
To pick up on the what I was mentioning earlier, you essentially writing because you ran out of things to read about. From what I could tell, you loved reading the point horror series in your teenage years.
Yeah,
Yes,
I
and
absolutely love
mm,
point horror. Sometimes I've kind of given them most of them away because they you don't always grow up, because I still read YA fiction and horror. I still read,
mm,
but because they're such a part of my childhood, I'm actually looking at them out of the corner of my eye as I'm speaking, because I kept a few of the series, like my favorites. I've still got them, and sometimes I still go back and reread. And it's funny because they're called point horror, but I didn't realize that at the time what I was reading was basically crime fiction for teenagers, which is what it is. You've got the case, someone ends up dead, and then you kind
mhm,
of solve the mystery, but it's not a detective, but it's students solving things instead. And I
mhm.
didn't really realize that until a while later. So it kind of makes sense that I went into crime a little bit.
Makes sense, yes. And even just a cursory glance at your social media shows how big an anime fan you are.
Yes, I am
And
a massive anime fan, love anime.
I could tell. And how would you say did your tastes influence your writing, if at all? Your prior tastes in what you read as a teenager, and how the things you still enjoy to this day,
I
did they in any way influence it?
I guess I think they must do. Probably in a much more subtle way than I probably don't realize it. So I think because with the anime and the manga that I read predominantly tend to be shonen, so they tend to be action adventure types, things
Mhm.
like that. Um, and I remember that I would walk to school, and I'd be listening to Linkin Park at the time, and I'd be imagining all these epic fight scenes, and I think it just really kind of helped my imagination to, like, the way that it builds scenes, the way that it flows. I think I got that inspiration from watching those things.
Mhm.
That excitement, like understanding the build of tension and a lot of the underdog, things like that. I think I got it all from there, to be honest.
Mhm.
And even now, although I haven't written fight scenes, the way that my scenes build, it's all in my head. It's very, I don't know how to describe it. I don't know how it is, like, for instance, for yourself when you write, but
Mhm.
when you're constructing your scene in my head, I'm seeing it like it's a movie,
Mhm. Yeah,
and I
cinematic, right?
yeah,
Yes.
exactly. So I kind of see it like that, and I think I got that as well from that part of things, from really loving how scenes are built and how they see. And I think I become a little bit of obsessed with trying to show the reader that kind of moving picture,
Mhm.
that they're seeing what I'm seeing. Well, I try, I try anyway. But apart from that, I think also, I think what probably isn't as obvious from my social media is that I was a big romance reader as well. I still am.
Mhm.
And I know a lot of people won't talk about romance and reading romance and things like that and how it affects their work, but I think it impacted how I write a lot, because often with romance you don't have. I feel like in some ways romance is harder to write because you don't necessarily have external forces
Mhm.
working against you. You don't have an investigation to solve. You don't have, I don't know, alien coming from space to kill half the planet. Sorry, I was rewatching Avengers the other day.
Mhm.
That's what came to mind. So it's a lot quieter. It's a lot more about, I think, emotions and internal tension. And I think that influenced the way I write a lot, focusing on relationships between characters and family and love of family, if not necessarily a romantic interest, but definitely those deeper emotions. So I think that's influenced my work quite a lot as well.
Mhm.
Mm.
Interesting. Well, let's talk about The Colors of Death then. Your murder mystery with sci-fi elements, which takes place in Lisbon, of all places. From what I could tell, the critics have complimented you on the way you managed to blend the sci-fi whodunit mix. Tell us about the premise, if you will.
So see, this is where I'm supposed to showcase my
Right, because an author has to be at its own age, their
yeah,
own age
but I
nowadays.
still haven't mastered that. So basically, The Colors of Death is about Inspector Isabel Reis.
Mhm.
Well, Isabel Reis.
Mhm.
But what happens is a politician's a politician's son ends up being murdered, and in a quite a gruesome and public an unusual way, and his body is found in one of the trains in Gare do Oriente. And then it's Isabel's job to come and solve that crime. What makes it a little bit different is that you don't understand how this could have been a murder, because essentially this person, from a standby point of view, killed himself. And that's where the elements of sci-fi come in, because then you learn that the world is actually made up of regular people and gifted people. And gifted people have either telekinesis or telepathy. And so, and there's a lot of tension between the regular people and the gifted. There's quite a lot of an undercurrent of suspicion aimed at gifted individuals. And my inspector, Isabel, she happens to be gifted herself. So it's a crime that's very much placing her in the middle of the tensions between the two worlds. Yeah, I'm not sure if I described that quite well. I tried.
Yeah, sounds like a pretty intriguing hook to me.
Good. I'm glad. Thank you.
And did you set out to mix your favorite genres, or did the whole process come about naturally?
I think, yeah, definitely naturally. I find that most of the time when I start writing, even if it's a particular one specific genre, it just ends up kind of not working for me, and I end up remixing it and adding bits of other things. So it was definitely a kind of like a natural progression when I was writing it, because I absolutely love sci-fi, and I think I love reading gender mashes. It's so fun, and I think it bring a freshness to genre. Not that like the genre isn't fine by itself, but I like the different spin that it adds to stories. So for The Colors of Death, yeah, it was definitely a kind of natural evolution of the story to become that way.
To pick up on the gifted part, from what I could tell, your book also strongly plays with the theme of prejudice by way of the fear of superpowered beings, not unlike, say, the mutants in the X-Men. And I had a bit of a provocative question, asking, is it really unreasonable, considering we're not talking, say, about different ethnicities, but rather about genuine superpowered beings who could, with the potential for destruction, much like, say, the classification and special treatment that we reserve for dangerous dogs, for example? Is that unreasonable for the government in the Lisbon you created, for there to be this segregation, so to speak, and the special treatment that the government and the institutions reserve for the gifted?
I think you can be cautious up to a point, but then, as a government, and as we know, governments most of the time don't always do what we'd like them to do. It has to be evidence-based. So, for instance, in my book, there's a particular incident that happens in Colombo with a young lady who didn't know, or who'd been misclassified. So her powers weren't, I guess she wasn't guided through it. She didn't learn it like how Isabel was kind of learning her powers. She didn't have that guidance, and she was and her level was quite high. So it ended up causing a massive accident where there were fatalities. But that, for instance, that caused a lot of friction in that world. But A, it wasn't an intentional thing. She didn't set out to hurt anyone. And B, even if it had been an intentional thing, that would have been one out of many. And so there's this prevalence in society for a group to be severely misjudged by the acts of one person. And that always tends to happen towards minorities and never towards the majority. So actually quite a lot like ethnicities and how people do get judged because of the color of their skin or where they're from, which is ridiculous. So in terms of, if we were looking, for instance, at national security, then I can understand the caution, because, these people can read minds. Some of them okay, I can understand you being cautious, but to then completely villainize an entire people, which sadly happens, I think that is unreasonable. And and I know you mentioned dogs as an example, and instantly pit bulls sprung to mind, and that was a classic example because them are sweethearts, but because of one incident or another, the whole breed is like, deemed dangerous, when actually it's mostly humans who end up messing things up, which is often the case in the world as well. So yeah.
Fair point. I guess we'll just have to read to find out what happens in the story. And still touching on those powers, will you be expanding the repertoire in future books, or do you have a thing about telekinesis and telepathy?
Yes and no. Without giving away too many spoilers, it's not as black and white as it may seem. They won't suddenly start getting new different powers. I can say that every power that is featured within the series does fall into, I guess, the range of what would be under telekinesis and telepathy. Like, for instance, the character, I don't think it's a spoiler, but there is a character who, because in the book, you've basically got the levels of the gifted are measured from 1 to 10, 10 being extremely powerful, and in 1 being, just like soft powers. So you do have one of the characters who work with Isabel, and she is a lower level gifted, and she falls into the telekinesis branch, but she can't really read thoughts, but she senses emotions. So in other sci-fi books, that would be an empath. She wouldn't be telekinetic, a telepath. She would just be an empath. But I suppose in the rules that make up my world, she falls in within that. But she just feels emotions from other people rather than thoughts and things like that. So you'll kind of like, I guess get a spectrum from within each classification, but not necessarily like something completely different. And I don't think that will change. Okay,
interesting. Onto the main character then. We have Isabel Reis. Now, I would like you to tell us a bit about her, but first, just out of sheer authorial curiosity, is she something out of a random name generator, or is there something behind the name? I ask because there usually is something behind the names of my characters, even if they are just Portuguese or English or what have you.
I mean, I definitely had to find Portuguese names, so they had to be, with the exception of Isabel's partner, of course. But I was really stuck, actually. I knew she was going to be Isabel from the beginning, but I had no idea about the surname. And then I kind of just randomly plucked the surname from like a member of my family. It wasn't particularly because it was his surname, but I was just like, you know what? I like how that sounds, and I like how that goes together. And actually, one of my aunties is called Isabel, so I think she's very pleased at the fact that the main character has her first name. But apart from that, I don't think there was anything in particular. I did, but I couldn't explain to you why she was always Isabel from the beginning. It just happened. And the same went for I think my concern was mainly just finding good names that just fit the character because they sounded right and they fit them, rather than a particular meaning, which is interesting because when I tried to write fantasy, I was a lot more focused on the meaning of the names and matching names to the character. But funnily enough, writing this book, that didn't quite happen. So it's interesting. I wonder if it was because it was a different genre, and like you said, because you write fantasy, I wonder if that's why there are meanings to names and things like that.
Could very well be, yes. Yeah. And I know it's a bit of a loaded term, but considering that, like yourself, she has a Portuguese and Angolan ancestry, is your main character a self-insert of sorts in the story?
No, I wouldn't say so. No. Because I think I was more writing what I know. So her family dynamic is the family not quite like that, but in terms of heritage and culturally, what she has is what I know, is my family dynamic that I know. So that made it easier to write that kind of Portuguese family, because to me, in my head, that's my family, even though it's, you know, mixed. That's my my world, and I think that's why things made it over there. But definitely not a self-insert. I'm trying to think if we share any characteristics. I mean, apart from, I guess one thing that we do share deeply is our love of family. And that's definitely something that's from me that I put in there. I think she feels the same devotion, not necessarily with other members of her family, but that's because of other conflicts. But you can tell, particularly in her relationship with her brother, that the love is there. And even with even though there's issues there, you can tell that there's a somewhat almost like there's just like this love and this loyalty there. And that definitely came from me. I think that's where we could probably both identify. The rest, she's a very serious person. And I've got my serious moments, but I'm not quite that intense, I don't think.
Do you also have a bit of a potty mouth?
It depends on the situation. Yes. Yeah, I can definitely cuss with the best of them when the situation calls for it.
Right. You were switching gears now. You were talking about family, and in one of your interviews, I don't know if you gave more than one Portuguese interview to a Portuguese newspaper, but the one
just the one.
just the one. Okay, then we're talking about the same one. In that one, you mentioned that, or rather, you emphasized the Portuguese food and the warmth of its people. And my question to you is there anything else to the country that you feel connected to and that keeps bringing you back? Because I asked because we seem to get that quite a lot. But the Portuguese have good food and they are very warm as a people, which makes us sound like a glorified vacation spot. So I was wondering if there was anything else that keeps bringing you back.
I think
you feel connected. Sorry.
Yeah, no, I think to be honest, I think it's just because it's home. Although London has become home, it's home. I mean, I go there and automatically feel like, yeah, I belong here. So I don't think there's anything. I mean, I suppose that's quite deep enough, but I don't think there's anything deeper than that. Obviously, the food and the people being warm, like you said, is a given. There's a lot more to Portugal and Lisbon than that. There's a lot of negatives as well.
Sure.
But I wasn't going to showcase that in my book too much. But, you know, there's things that, you know, like, for instance, I give this example a lot. I've got my friends, and sometimes our some close friends who are East Asian, and sometimes our cultures overlap slightly in terms of again, family, the way family dynamics, even the dynamics that you have with your neighbors there is different. It's not necessarily always warm, but you know, for instance, like just the gossip. I mean, there's things that happen over here in my life that somehow are known over there in Portugal, and it's like this international gossip network that you just can't, you literally superpower, you can't escape from it. And there's like all of these little things, and you just it's a familiarity. So, and I think it's that familiarity that does keep bringing me back, because London is very different. You know, it's very isolated. I think people are very isolated. You can meet up with people all the time, but you know, you don't have that culture where, you know, every time I'm in Portugal after dinner, I'm not going to be at home. I'll be downstairs in the cafe. Having like a carioca de limão and just having a chat and just chilling out. Even if it's winter, you still go downstairs and have that. Whereas here, you've got your coffee shops and they close at like maybe 8 at the latest. Other than that, what you've got is a pub. And although pubs are great, it's not the same kind of ease of being, I think. And I think in Portugal, despite economically there being a lot of struggles in jobs, you know, it's not easy, especially for someone like me who's got an arts degree. I've got no idea what I would be able to do in Portugal. It's probably very impossible for me to get a job there. But despite all those stresses, there's a lighter feel to people, I think, mentally. There's a more I don't know quite how to describe it. The pace is different, and it's not as it's plenty stressful in its own way, but it's not quite as bad as when you're here. Because I feel like here there's like stress plus there's isolation, whereas there, you know, you can always go downstairs and have a chat, whereas here you probably wouldn't do that. So it's all of those things. I think it's so many different things you can't really pin it. I could probably go on finding
sure.
All of those things I think keep drawing me back, because it's very different, but it's very soothing. It's very sorry.
So, considering you left at such a young age, do you feel and experience all those things from an outsider's perspective, or is there a genuine familiarity to it whenever you come here?
There is. I mean, because I think the good thing was I left when I was young, but when I went back, it was like I was going back every summer and for a really, really long time, not twice a year. And because my dad's family still, well, and my mom's family, but my dad and things, they still live there, so we're still going home. But I think every time I go back, I haven't been back in a while now because of the pandemic, which is weird because it's the longest I've ever been away. I think normally when I go back, there is like this weird disconnect for a couple of days where I'll be like, oh, and I have to like, it's almost like my brain needs to rewire. And then once I sink in and I'm home. But it's interesting that you should ask that, because I suppose in those 2 days, I do feel a certain awkwardness where I'm acclimating and kind of just sinking into the lifestyle again and into the way things are done. But then once I'm in, and then I come back and it's like, oh, okay, splash of like cold water in the face and you're having to readapt again. So there is sometimes when you go back, there is like a slight awkwardness, especially because I left so young.
Right.
So a lot of people there know me as, you know, so-and-so's daughter. So it's, you know, a filha da Fernanda e do Norberto. It's not like they don't remember exactly who you are, but they remember who you are in connection to the people that they know. And so then it's weird because so many people have left and it was such a long time ago. So there's that kind of disconnect as well. But it's always the same. But it changes. There's certain changes that have happened, but in a way, Portugal doesn't change at all, which is comforting. It's
both good, but it's both good and bad.
Yeah.
Fair enough. I was hesitant to ask this because it is a bit of a silly question, but do you, as a published author now, do you feel that in any way that you represent Portugal abroad? Is there anything similar to that feeling, or am I completely off base here?
No, I think you do. I think especially because you're here and you know that, especially in the UK, I mean, there's barely any books that are set in Portugal unless originally written in the Portuguese language and then translated into English. So it's very rare, especially in crime and things like that, or sci-fi exclusively, for you to find books that are set in Portugal. So I guess I do feel a bit of a sense of obligation to do, not to do well, but to like represent it properly, right. Kind of do it, you know, make people proud and not like people look over there and go, oh, for God's sake, no, this is all live. What is she talking about? And all of that. So I was actually quite a bit nervous once it was out there, because I thought, oh God. And I was more worried about Portuguese people reading it than English speakers reading it, because English speakers or people from different countries, they can just, you know, they can take it at face value because they haven't lived there, but Portuguese people live there and they know what it's like. And although I know it's, you know, not entire, it's based on the real world and there's elements of sci-fi, so I've got a little bit of a license to mess around and change things. You know, the main essence of it remains the same. So I was very nervous about having Portuguese readers look at it and just go, "Oh God, this is a bunch of crap." And so I was quite nervous about that. But yeah, I suppose you do. And I think other things like, I think because it's not. I mean, I've still got people that I talk to here, and they think that Portugal is, you know, a part of Spain, and I'm like, no, that's not the case. They're separate countries and things like that. So you do feel a sense of responsibility at trying to kind of set the records
Mm,
in some way. So you do. I think there is a little bit of that, actually. Yeah.
good on you.
Thanks.
The unless I am completely forgetting, at the time of the interview I read that didn't seem to be a case, but are you at liberty right now to discuss whether or not there have been some overtures from Portuguese publishers about your book?
I'm not sure if I'm at liberty to
Right, never mind then.
but I mean, there've been like, yeah, some positive changes, I would say. Some
Okay.
inquiries I'll put out there. So
Good to know. Good to know.
yeah, so it would be, hopefully if that plays through, then it'd be quite nice. But yeah, there's been a positive turn of events is what I would say.
Let's put it that way and leave it at that. Okay, fair enough. So switching gears again, writer's block, or let's call them less than inspired nights. They are the bane of every writer. We all know that. And trusted sources claim that your emergency writing kit is one double choc mocha and the Crime Plus investigation channel. Does that always work for you, or was it a temporary solution?
It works. If it's not, I mean, if it's not the crime channel, then it's Lord of the Rings, the trilogy on replay. Anything that I've watched that can distract me at times, but because I've watched it, I'm not going to be pulled into it. Yeah, mainly it's just sitting at the desk until it gets done. I've gotten to the point where I'm so desperate that I'm literally telling myself, just 10 words, write 10 words. And then when you get to the end of the 10 words, you write another 10 words. And it's literally had to be one. I know it sounds so cliche or just like silly, but it's had to be like literally promising myself one word at a time when times get really tough. And just not sleeping. Lack of sleep always seems to do it for me.
Sounds familiar. Yes.
I can imagine. Like you said, the bane of every writer's existence.
And I wasn't really going to address that because I was trying to focus on your book and your life experiences, but I can't resist since you brought up Lord of the Rings and previously you mentioned having written fantasy, one of your attempts. Is that one of your genres, or can we expect something from you in the future?
I do. I mean, I'm not locked into one genre. I do love crime. I love speculative crime, and I suspect I'll probably write mainly within that overall, because that's where I think my interests lie. But I have a love for like disaster movies. I'd love to write that version of my zombie apocalypse. I love apocalyptic scenario. So probably all of those things will come into play. But in terms of fantasy, I do have one idea that stayed with me for quite a lot of years. I think I've written maybe half of it. I probably wouldn't use what I have written, but it's probably because I've figured out now how I want the world to work. But that one in particular is something that I would like to write, even if it doesn't see the light of day. I think I need to, because it's always stayed in the back of my mind. So I've got at least one fantasy series in me. Whether it sees the light of day or not is a different question, but at least that one, I think, that will happen. Yeah.
Always good to know.
Yeah. Also set in the Iberian Peninsula, so that's so yes, I think that's what took me so long. But anyway, that's a different thing. But yeah.
Consider me intrigued. Good. All right, Patrícia, I think it's time. Because as you know, this channel is also about the Portuguese language, and I present my guests with 3 unusual and largely forgotten words that illustrate just how rich the Portuguese language is. And I asked my interviewees to make a sentence with them, whether or not they know what they mean. Now, since this interview has been conducted in English, and since from what I could tell, your book contains quite a number of Portuguese words that you just nonchalantly spray it with.
Yeah.
I'd like to challenge you to make up a sentence in English with each of the following 3 words. Oh, by the way, all of which came from Kimbundu as a nod to your Angolan heritage, which I have which has been an oversight, and I have ignored largely in this interview. So this is my my way to rectify that. And then I tell them, and then I'll tell you what they mean in case you don't. Although, truth be told, these words, I don't believe they're particularly difficult, but...
that'll make it worse if I get it wrong.
I just found it interesting because they are words I actually knew, but I had no idea they came from Kimbundu. So goes to show how diverse our language truly is. So are you ready for it?
Yeah, no time like the present. Go for it.
Okay, so Kijila.
What? Kijila?
Kijila.
Oh, God.
Imagine you're Isabel Reis and you come across a Kijila. Well, what would she say about that Kijila?
Oh my God, I've got no idea. So wait, so am I meant to do a sentence in English with it?
Yes, in English with the word Kijila. Just think of what comes to your mind when you hear it and go for it.
Is it Kijila C-A-S?
Q-U-A. Sorry, Q-U-E. Sorry.
Kijila. Okay. Right. Ooh, now I'm thinking cheese, but
go for it. If she's a cheese lover, go for it.
I do like. I like a Kijila, but that's a bit different. Oh God. Yeah. Okay. You know what? I'm just gonna.
Yeah. Go ahead. There are no wrong sentences here. Only funny ones.
It could. Yeah. I was gonna say. I love a good Kijila, but I don't know what that means.
That'll do. Because it means it's a quarrel or a beef between people.
Okay, that could still work.
Right? Yeah. Yes. If she's confrontational type, that would work.
I'm gonna use that. Okay.
Okay. And now I'm probably going to butcher it. I don't know Kimbundu, but apparently it comes from Kijila.
Okay.
Or Kijila, or no idea how to pronounce it. I'm sorry.
Okay.
Word number 2. Benze.
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 Can you spell it for me?
Yeah, sure. B-A-N-Z-E. Benze. A-N-Z-E.
Man, no, these are hard.
How would Isabel Reis react if she came across a benze?
Probably be as confused as I am, to be honest. Kimbundu is just as bad. Bring the benze.
Trying to think of a way that could work.
Oh God, I'm literally just making things up.
Of course, that's the idea. No, benze, it's actually a fuss or a ruckus. Que grande benze. If you come across a big mess.
I'm gonna have to sit down with my grandma now and like show these off, and she'll just be like, "What? That's what I'm gonna be."
And benze apparently comes from mazué. Apologies to your granny in advance. And finally, last but not least, this one should be familiar to you. I was surprised when I found out its origin. But the third and final word is karimbu.
Karimbu. Oh.
You might be familiar with it.
What, like a stamp?
Yeah.
Oh, sorry. I just didn't.
No problem.
Oh, I didn't know that was Kimbundu. Sorry, I'm so distracted by the fact that was, I need a karimbu.
Right.
Yeah.
And the Kimbundu word is it replaced the C with a K and the O with a U.
Wow.
Karimbu.
So that's the actual origin of that word.
Fancy that. I had no idea.
You learn something new every day. Well, 3 new things in my case today.
I certainly did too when I looked it up.
Quite cool. I'm gonna be going on my family group chat and saying, guys, did you know?
Okay, Patrícia. Well, this has been a delightful little chat. I usually try to keep them reasonably short. Sometimes I fail. Today it seems like I managed to. Of course, there's always one other question you can make, but I do hope I was able to cover the basics and to introduce you to readers who might not be aware of you, especially since you have yet to be published in Portugal.
Yeah.
And I'll be sure to leave all relevant information down below in the video. But if you could tell any prospective readers where they can find you, social media, or how they can keep up with your comings and goings.
Yeah, sure. So I'm on Twitter. Probably for writerly stuff, you'll find me on Twitter. Marques P09. I'm also on Instagram. That's a little bit more self-absorbed, so I don't know if you'd want to go there. But there's also book stuff there, some Instagram lives, so you can follow me on either for book news. And books can be found probably on, well, in Portugal not yet, but around in the UK you can definitely find me in most bookstores, or at least order them. Amazon, but probably go indie because we want to try and beat the capitalism. No, I'm joking. So you can like find me in those places. But yeah, any bookstore in the UK, you can probably get yourself a copy, or libraries as well. So yeah, libraries are good. But yeah,
Very good.
Thank you so much for having me, by the way. It's been really lovely. Thank
you. It's been a pleasure. And thank you for watching. And I'll see you in the next episode of Literatura Nacional, most likely back to Portuguese.